Welcome back to this episode of Talking Football with Joe and John, where we're talking about all things Pittsburgh Steelers. And today we have a very special guest, my own father, Steve Height, who's going to be talking about all things, again, the Steelers from the preseason, training camp, the season outlook, a lot of great memories as a longtime Steelers fan. So, Dad, my first question to you, obviously, judging by your jersey and the amazing background you have behind you, I'm obviously big Franco Harris fans is the reason why we are Steeler fans. I just want to get your initial reactions to yesterday's news that they're retiring his number on December 24th against the Oakland Raiders, like you called yesterday. Your reactions of that and just all your memories as a Franco Harris fan.
Thanks. Yeah, I was very happy to hear. Franco's actually the reason why I became a Steeler fan. They drafted him in, as you know, 72, which coincidentally was the same year as the Immaculate Reception. But Franco's the type of guy, because I met him a couple of times, as did you. He's really involved in the community in Pittsburgh. He's all over. He goes to a lot of the games. He's involved in a lot of charity work. So well deserved, of course. And the Steelers aren't known for retiring numbers. As you know, they've only retired two. Joe Green and then Ernie Stoughton, who played back in the 50s. So it's a pretty big honor for him. But like I said, Franco, he played for Penn State, if you remember, and that's how I became a fan. I actually liked his name. My dad was a Giant fan, and obviously I rooted for my father's team until I learned that Franco Harris was going to the Steelers, and that's actually how I became a Steeler fan. And as you know, we actually told Franco that story, and he really liked it. But well deserved. I thought he was a little underrated for other running backs. He was the guy that was going to break Jim Brown's record, if you remember. And then he ended up going to Seattle and never did it. But so I thought he didn't get the credit he deserved comparing him with the top running backs. But again, ideally he had the greatest play in NFL history, which he'll always be remembered for. But he was a fantastic running back. And they didn't start winning until Franco got there. So a lot to be said. But again, well deserved.
And real quick, before Joe asks his question, just a kind of a follow, because I was reading it on Steelers Twitter. There was also kind of an argument that people were, I guess, a little bit upset that maybe like Bradshaw wasn't getting in first, or even that Bradshaw and Franco weren't getting their numbers retired together in some capacity. Like, what were your thoughts on that? Or do you think that it's appropriate that Franco is the next Steeler to get his number retired?
Yeah, I guess you could make that argument. And again, I'll throw Mel Blount in there too. I mean,
yeah, even him.
You're talking about, Blount basically when they change a rule because of you, that's pretty significant. And people didn't realize how good Mel Blount was. But I think because, well, you know what? Actually, with Bradshaw, you can make that argument because they were both part of that play on the Immaculate Reception. So
Exactly.
it makes sense. I don't, maybe they want to do it separate, but you know what it was is Bradshaw didn't have a great relationship with the city of Pittsburgh when he left, nor with the press. So maybe that kind of hurt him, but he deserves it. I mean, again, he deserves it. And again, I would throw Mel Blount in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I could say something too about that, my dad and I also talked a lot about who was going to be the next number retired if there was going to be one, and we both. And my dad was like, "It's got to be Franco. He's the guy. The Immaculate Reception kind of turned the franchise around." I don't think Bradshaw ever gets his number retired just because of his relationship with the team in the city. I think knowing Pittsburgh and kind of how they move, I think that's why it went Joe Green and then Franco. Okay. I think next, if they're going to do another one, maybe Lambert, I could see, and then probably Ben would be the one after that. Yeah. But again, they don't really retire numbers, so
yeah, I would do Blount first. I'm a little partial, My two favorite players back in those years was Franco and Mel Blount. But yeah, I mean, Lambert, you can't dispute Lambert, and like you said, who's the other name you threw out there?
Ben.
And Ben. Yeah, I mean, Ben did so much for the team as well, but you got to wonder how Bradshaw would take that if Ben got his number retired and he didn't.
Yeah,
I think that would kind of cause an issue there in Pittsburgh. But Bradshaw deserves it, regardless of the fact that, he had a falling out with the Steelers, and I think they made up eventually. He was a big time quarterback. I mean, with that team, you got, the defense carried him all the years, but he had so many big games. And, even if he threw a couple of interceptions, he'd always make the big play, and he was tough as nails too.
So yeah, so obviously you said that you became a fan because of Franco Harris, which is awesome. So what was it like then, kind of, going through those down years with the team? Obviously, 70s, when you just become a fan, they're great, and then the 80s they're not so well. 90s they start to come back, but they still couldn't win anything until 2000s. What was that like going through all that after
seeing
that high in the beginning?
The drought was tough. Again, you're used to winning, again, starting from the 70s. And then even, the early 80s, they actually got to the title game and Marino's team beat them up with Miami. They weren't that good. Miami was real good that year. And the only team that could beat Miami was the Niners that year with Marino. But it was tough. There's like 2 or 3 years in Cowher where I think they won 6 games or 7 games or, below 500. It was rough watching them. But I knew at some point that they would rebuild the team because they always drafted well. And, obviously, you need a quarterback. They had some decent quarterbacks in some of the title years in '94 where they got to the championship, they got to the Super Bowl. I thought Neil O'Donnell was a decent quarterback. I was upset, believe it or not, when he left because I actually worked with his brother. So I actually got to talk to Neil before he went to play for the Jets. And I kind of begged him to stay because I thought he was good for their system. I didn't think he was great, but I thought he was good. And he had a great year the year they went to the Super Bowl. And they should have beat Dallas that year, actually. As good as Dallas was, they outplayed them in the second half and should have won that game. But, again, you got to have the quarterback. And they were lucky. Bradshaw, you had that drought and they passed on Marino like everybody else and, then getting Ben. But, yeah, that period of time was tough as a Steeler fan. But what are you going to do? You can't have it every year, right?
Yeah.
And now, speaking of quarterback, I think that's our good pivot point now to talking about today's team, the year of 2022. So training camp and preseason has wrapped up. And the first question we want to ask you about this current team is obviously this is the first time, at least, I've been born that Ben is no longer the quarterback of this team. And the whole controversy of the offseason has been, what are they going to do with Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and Kenny Pickett? I know you've watched all the preseason games. You've seen the film of them. You know their past. You know that Trubisky played for the Bears. He had a up and down career there. Right? You said you didn't see a lot of Pickett in college, and then Mason Rudolph. We've seen the handful of times he's been in the NFL. What are your thoughts on this quarterback carousel? And do you think that Trubisky should have been the Week 1 starter?
I'm not opposed to Trubisky being the Week 1 starter. I didn't see a lot of Pickett. I did like him though. He has that moxie to him. You can tell he's a leader. You can kind of tell he obviously can throw. Again, I only saw him play a few times in college. Trubisky had his ups and downs with the Bears, so I'm hoping. And Rudolph, I think they gave him enough chances. I just don't think he's a good backup, I guess. But as far as leading the team, because you got to, he played when Ben didn't play, or he would play in even games they didn't need. And he just didn't really impress me that much. He had a couple of decent passes here and there, but he never really took control of the team. And I guess it's hard when you're a backup. But I have mixed feelings about starting Trubisky over Pickett, only because I don't think it's going to be a great year for the Steelers, because the AFC is loaded and their division is very competitive. So you can make an argument that maybe you want to throw him into the fire right away as opposed to Trubisky. But, we'll get into it. With the offensive line woes they have, you really don't want the guy getting hurt his first year. And they have to address that first. But I don't have a problem with it. I don't think he's going to – I think Pickett's going to end up starting. Maybe it'd be nice when we're going to the Tampa game, so it'd be nice to see him play there. But I don't have a problem with them starting Trubisky. I don't think they really played enough where you could really definitively choose one over the other, but I could see why they chose Trubisky.
Yeah, I feel like for me, that offensive line is the reason I kind of lean to start Trubisky, because you don't want to see Pickett get killed early on and have his confidence be shot. Because once his confidence is shot, we saw with Trubisky. His first season, his confidence was shot, and he's been trying to build it back since then.
Yeah.
And I also don't think Trubisky's that bad. Not saying I think he's going to be started the whole year or he's going to, be this all pro. But I think he can win you a few games. Let Kenny Pickett still keep getting acclimated to the offense. And then whenever Tomlin feels ready for Pickett to come in, let him come in.
Yeah, I don't think I don't disagree with that, because preseason that's not a good gauge. You're playing against third and fourth stringers half the time. There's no scheming. A lot of guys don't even play. So you really can't take it, because if they had a good preseason, it's almost like they had a good practice. It's really not game speed. And the NFL is a whole different ball game. And the only thing that concerns me about Pickett a little bit is, he didn't play, he wasn't in the SEC where, everybody, they have first round picks all over. So I'm wondering if his competition in college, you got to see how he gets acclimated to playing these top-notch teams in the NFL. And hopefully it'll work out, because, Ben went to Miami of Ohio, and look what happened with him. So it didn't hurt him down the road. But that's something I'd kind of like to see, is how Pickett plays against some of these top-notch defenses in the NFL.
Yeah, and with Trubisky, me and Joe have debated this before on the show. How much worse or better is he than last year's, quote unquote washed up Ben. I mean, there were games last year. Obviously, Ben towards the end of the games had a little bit of the vintage self in him where he was, able to string along drives to help them win games. But for the majority of the performances last season, he was pretty awful. Like it just was, you could tell he can't move anymore, which was his bread and butter, obviously, in his prime. And if Trubisky could make these longer throws down the field, which I think he showed a little bit in practice, I mean, all guys like George Pickens and Chase Claypool have to do is get open, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, Ben. I mean, Ben actually brought him back again a few games last year, but he was definitely, the lack of mobility hurt him, and then his arm strength. I mean, he had the elbow issue a couple of years ago. It definitely affected him, and it sure as heck affected him the year they were 11-0. The whole second half of the season, Ben couldn't throw 40 yards. You felt bad because Ben's such a competitor. But yeah, I don't think. I think Trubisky. I agree with Joe. There's an upside to Trubisky. Again, change the scene, and I'll use Ryan Tannehill as an example. He was in Miami. The line wasn't that good. Look what happened. He went to Tennessee. You gave him a great running back, and they have a whole different scheme. And look how successful he was there. So there's nothing to say that Trubisky can't do it if the offensive line holds up for them.
And maybe I'm being naive, but like I don't think I could name other than David Montgomery who were the skill position players on that Bears team that Trubisky had. I can't name one receiver. Maybe Allen Robinson. That's it.
Right. Yeah, he didn't have a lot of talent. Yeah, the Steelers' offense. I mean, we've talked about this. They're loaded on offense. I mean, if not taking that line away, but between their receivers and Najee could be all world, and hopefully this guy Warren will pan out. But if you give the guy Trubisky time, I mean, you got a lot of weapons on that team, and you have a great tight end now in Freiermuth, who kind of reminds me of Heath Miller a little bit, same type of player, but he's big, and then 4 or 5 good weapons on offense as far as the wide receivers go. So we could be pleasantly surprised. I'm trying to be a little optimistic here. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's no lack of skill, I think, in any of the skill positions on offense. I think we can all say that. But now shifting to the defense, we know we're going to get a TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, all the regulars. I think a big question mark this year we've talked about is the linebacker position with guys like Devin Bush. I think we all agree that Miles Jack was a great addition. But what are your thoughts on the overall defense? This includes, pass rush, rush defense, the secondary, which has been pitiful for many years now. But what are your thoughts on the overall unit, and do you think they'll be sustainable enough for them to win games?
Okay, let's start with the defensive line first. So Alualu's back, but I think he's 35. So and he's coming off a pretty bad injury. We don't know what we'll get. Losing 2 would hurt. Obviously he had issues, but he was very good. Cam will be great as always. I mean, he doesn't seem to age. I mean, he's borderline Hall of Fame already. That's how good he is. I'll tell you who's going to be a key is on the other side of TJ is Highsmith. I mean, you want to see them mimic like they had with Lloyd and Kevin Green, where they were blitzing from both sides. Because if Highsmith has a decent year, I mean, how much better can TJ get? I mean, he's getting 20 sacks, so that's key for them. And then I think Jack inside. And I'm going to give Bush one more chance this year because he kind of reminds me of what Bud Dupree was. If you remember, when they drafted Dupree was not good for the first 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden he had that breakout year, and unfortunately he got hurt. So I'm going to kind of give him a pass. I hope he can step up. But the linebackers, if Highsmith's good, I think he'll be okay. The secondary worries me a little. Minka's great. He'll be good. I'm not sure about, Sutton, the corners, and who's it? Witherspoon's the other one. And some of the backups, Pierre's okay, Mullet's okay. But I think the key is the pass rush, obviously. You're not going to give them all day. I think they could play zone, but if they got to play man with that secondary against some of these top-notch receivers, they're going to have a hard time. They got to get to the quarterback. And the only thing that worries me about TJ is he gets hurt a lot. So you got to hope that we get a full year out of TJ on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that would help. But the key is the pass rush and then the linebackers in coverage, and you got a couple of question marks there, and I think that'll dictate how well the team does this year. And then hopefully the offense can run the ball and keep the defense off the field. That's what killed the Steelers last year, if you remember. The defense was on the field way too long, and 3 and out all the time. There's only so long you can sustain that. But I see more upside, obviously, on the defense than the offense. And like Joe and I had said, because of the offensive line, and you're hoping. They brought these free agents in. You hope they gel because they didn't look good at all in preseason. But again, I don't put a lot of stock in preseason, and some of these guys are new. But that's my general feelings as far as both sides of the ball. And then I'll throw special teams in there too. Boswell is great, but Harvin's another guy that's got to step up for them this year. He'll give you a 70-yard punt, but how many times that he kicked the ball 30 yards last year, and then he's got to get better at pinning the teams back. I mean, at least, the Steelers, it seems like they're always starting from their own 10 and 15, whereas the other team is always getting a touchback or starting at the 30 because he shanks a punt. So I think it's a big year for him too.
Yeah, special teams are so important. I think a lot of people forget about that. I mean, if you have like the Patriots during their dynasty, they always had a great special teams. Always, they're always pinning teams back.
True.
Obviously, they had not Adam Vinatieri, but Gostkowski, I think it was.
Yeah.
But they were great on that. I think that's going to be huge, especially because with the offensive line, I think there's going to be a lot of punts this year for the Steelers.
Right.
So pinning them back and giving the Steelers defense, which should be the strength this year. Obviously, there's questions with the secondary and the run defense too. I'm a little nervous about. But if you could pin them back and make them go 90 yards, I don't see a lot of teams going 80, 90 yards on the Steelers this year. I just don't.
Yeah. Well, again, we got to see Alualu how he does, and losing to it again, it hurts. So, and Cam can't do it by himself.
I'm big on Ogunjobi though, Larry O. I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him play a little bit. He was on the Bengals, right? I think
Bengals and Browns.
Browns, yeah. So hopefully that'll be an upgrade for him because they definitely need help, obviously. But that's key. You got to stop. And the two biggest problems last year was the stopping the run and running the ball. So on the offensive side, what bothers me about their run game is I think even if you look at the teams that the lesser teams, say the Giants, the Jets, the Jaguars, all of these teams can run the ball, and you're always seeing the running back get to the second level. Where the Steelers, it seems like the running backs are getting 2 yards caught in the backfield, or they're getting to the line of scrimmage and getting a yard. I want to see that those holes open up a little bit better and come off the ball a little bit, and at least give the running backs a chance to do something in the open field. I mean, Najee's such a great running back, but I'm afraid that he's going to try to do too much himself and end up getting hurt.
Yeah, that's the key. I like Najee's health. I think, well, obviously TJ Watt's health is the most important for the entire defense and the team, but the fact that he's already had a little bit of some injury issues in the preseason worries me a little bit. I think they might overuse him a little bit. That's why Jaylen Warren, I think, has to be great, as a backup. I know Benny Snell obviously still there. So they got to take the pressure off him a little bit, and the rest of the skill position guys, just because, Najee going down within the first 3 weeks of the season, I think it completely changed the trajectory of the team. And, like you said, that not having a good run game is going to kill them, because we even saw, like, as great as Najee was last season, there were plenty of times where the offensive line just folded, and that could happen again this year because we don't know how good and consistent the unit's going to be, and it's going to just hurt them more. It's going to help them. And again, we'll wait and see how that'll all pan out. But let's now turn to the full season schedule. So we're going to go game by game. You can give your unfiltered opinions on whether the Steelers will win the game or not. This is a safe space, so just tell your honest opinion. So we'll start with week 1, which is in exactly 4 days from the time of this recording, at the Cincinnati Bengals this Sunday at 1:00. So thoughts on that game?
My initial feelings were, not good, but I had the same feelings when they played Buffalo last year.
Yeah.
So, it's a divisional game. I realized last year they got blown out twice. So I don't think they're going to win the game, but I think they'll be a little more competitive than you think. I mean, it'd be great if they did win, but it'll be closer than people think. I know the line, I think, is only 7 points, but I think the Steelers will give them a game. I don't think they can win it though.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and we're used to what Ben used to do to the Bengals, but
Yeah.
new era, obviously. But a week later, home against the Patriots. This is not a Tom Brady Patriots, obviously. This is the Mac Jones Patriots. What do you think?
I like the Steelers in that game. And anytime Brady's not on the Patriots, I like the Steelers. I'm not sure they've ever even beaten the Steelers without Brady. Not too many games, but Mac Jones is okay, but they have a lot of problems in New England. They're not the same team. Their defense is always good. I don't think their offense is great. So I think our defense can shut them down. And I think hopefully we'll be able to throw on them. But when we're home, it's a home opener. So I like us in that game.
Yeah, I think like Jacoby Myers is their wide receiver 1 right now. Like they just do not have a ton of talent on offense, which I think is going to hurt Mac Jones in the long run. And but then this leads us to week 3 at Cleveland. I think this might be a Sunday night game.
Thursday
night. That's what it is. Yeah, I know it's at 8:15. Yeah. So they'll be playing Cleveland. It'll be a short turnaround 4 days after. What do you think? This is without Deshaun Watson.
Normally the road team on Thursday coming off a Sunday usually loses, but I like us in that game as well. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's not playing. but I don't see them generating a lot of offense. Who is it? Is it Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback?
Yeah, he's the
Or
quarterback.
Josh
Although he
Dobbs
did have
might
one
come into
great
that.
game against the Steelers, if you remember. I think he played for Green Bay or somebody, but I like us in that game as well. I think it'll be a real close game, a low scoring game, but I could see that. I could see a couple of turnovers going one way or the other, and I could see us pulling that game out as well.
Yeah, and then right after that, the greatest show on turf comes to Pittsburgh, the New York Jets, who remains to be seen if Zach Wilson will be back. I think he'll be back by then. I know Joe Flacco starting this season, so that'd be funny if he's coming back to Pittsburgh. He'll get a warm welcome. What do you think of that one?
If the Steelers win the two games I just mentioned, they're going to lose the Jet game, and it just seems like when they play the Jets, and you remember a couple of years ago, I'm sure Joe, Ben lit up the Colts and the Ravens for 12 touchdowns. The Jets come into town. They basically gave them, and not only did we lose the game, the score was not indicative of it. We were terrible in that game. So for some reason, two of the last three times they played, they just don't play well against the Jets. So if they lose one of the two that I just mentioned, I think they'll win. But if the Steelers go into that game at 2-1, I think they're going to be overconfident, which is kind of Tomlin's MO sometimes. And unfortunately, I think they're going to lose that game.
Mr. Height, I was actually at
3-1.
that game you mentioned, that Steelers Jets game in 2014. I was there with that
Right?
dad for that game. All Steelers fans, everyone, we went in there. We thought we were gonna just blow them out because the last two games, and oh my gosh, that was a stinker.
Wasn't it 20-0? Didn't it? And then they came back to Steelers, right? Which actually made it a game, I remember. But
Yeah,
they were
because
terrible.
They hit Brian over the top on a big play towards the end in the fourth quarter, and then it was like, oh wow, what? How's this close again? And then I think it was an onside kick that didn't get recovered, and that was it.
So yeah, that game worries me, unfortunately. But go ahead, yeah, because I don't see them starting 3-1. I'd be great, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, that's a trap game like that, like no other.
Right.
So we'll see about the Jets. But a week later, a much more difficult game. They'll be traveling to Buffalo. I mean, they beat them in Buffalo last year, right? Wasn't that week 1 of last season?
Yeah.
So what do you think for round 2?
That's going to be a rough one. Playing in week 1 is better than playing in week 5. Week 1, a lot of guys haven't played in preseason. It was not the same Buffalo team that should have went to the Super Bowl. So that's not going to be a close game, I don't think. I think that's going to be a bad game for them.
Yeah, that game could get ugly, I think.
Yeah, that could get ugly fast.
Yeah, the Bills really want to be Super Bowl bound this year. I think they're going to have a great regular season record too. But a week later will be our long-awaited return to Pittsburgh, where we're seeing the greatest quarterback ever play the Steelers with the Buccaneers. I think we know how this game's going to go. I mean, it's going to be fun to be there, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be close. I don't think, they're going to be home. It's going to be exciting. Obviously they'll be booing Brady like there's no tomorrow because he kills the Steelers. But no, they're not going to win that game. It'll be closer than people think. But Tampa, I mean, they're one of the top teams in the conference. Could be a Super Bowl contender again with Brady. So even though they're home, I don't see them winning that game either.
And we have to talk about at this point of the schedule where if there is a chance that maybe Trubisky gets off to a rough start, that hopefully Pickett could be in around one of these games, potentially, you would think. I mean, I hope his first game isn't at Buffalo, because you talk about destroying his confidence. I mean, there's no better way to destroy your confidence playing in Buffalo.
Yeah, I don't think they'll bring him in until they get to the bye. If in fact, let's say that they're, if they're 2-6 or something along those, because I think they're 8 games before the bye, maybe they'd make a change there because, when you get to the next 2 games, you're not going to want to bring him in against these 2 defenses.
Yeah, no.
I think the earliest they bring him in is the Jets game. I think that's the earliest you could see him bring him in.
Really?
I don't think he gets in there, but I think if they go early, I think it's there.
Interesting.
No, because we don't know how short the leash is going to be.
Yeah.
But a week later after the Bucs, they'll be playing at Miami against the Dolphins. What do you think?
Yeah, unfortunately, Miami's loaded this year. And Jonathan knows my best friend's a big Dolphin fan. They have a ton of weapons. I mean, Tua. I think if Tua is just good, they could fight for a playoff spot. And again, if they could find a way to beat Buffalo, the sky's the limit because their offense is loaded and they got a great defense. Although they did lose one of their defensive, I think Byron Scott, or one of their cornerbacks is out for the first 4 games, which is a big loss for them. But again, it'll be a close game. But if it was in Pittsburgh, I think they'd have a better chance. But I don't think they can win in Miami. Not the way that team is put together right now. And that defense is really good. I mean, the Dolphin defense, they totally shut down Lamar Jackson last year, if you remember in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a tough game. But a week later, I mean, we know how these games usually go. They're going to at Philadelphia against the Eagles. They never ever play well against the Eagles on the road, right?
Yeah, if you remember, and the year they went to the Super Bowl in 2008, the Eagles beat the heck out of Ben.
Oh,
I think they
man.
sacked them 9 times, and that's just not a good matchup for them. Again, if it was in Pittsburgh, I would think okay, but and Jalen Hurts looks really good in the preseason. So and that team, I think that team can win the division. Actually, I mean, I don't know how good Dallas is yet, and Dallas lost one of their best linemen, and they lost a lot of weapons. So Philly could be the sleeper team in the NFC this year. So unfortunately, I had them 2-6. If they can win the Jet game, 3-5, but right now I had them at 2-6 for the first 8 games.
My favorite fun fact is that Pittsburgh has not won in Philadelphia in a regular season game since the 60s.
Doesn't surprise me. I went to one game. I went to see them play at the Vet years ago with a buddy of mine that played college football, my friend Larry, and we went, and it was not even a good game. I mean, it was the fans are crazy, first of all, but yeah, they're not even competitive against Philly sometimes when they play them, which is kind of scary. Philly just beats them up.
Do you remember in 2016 when it was I think it was Carson Wentz first year? I think they beat us 34-3. It was like,
Yeah.
And we went to the AFC Championship game that year, and the Eagles won like 3 games.
Yeah, scary. Yeah, they were just not a good matchup. It's almost like when we used to play Brady, but they beat us up physically, so hopefully that'll be a little different for us this year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Steelers defense has to give Jalen Hurts like a nightmare in that game to even be close. And I think a big part of the Eagles season is going to be the play of him, because if Jalen Hurts is average or below average like he's been so far in the NFL, they won't be great. But like you said, they just for some reason do not play well in Philly. But a week later, they're back at home. They're hosting the New Orleans Saints, the Jameis Winston Saints. What do you think of that one?
I like the Steelers in that. And this is coming off a bye, right? Don't they have a bye?
Yeah.
So I like them
for
the
the
same
Eagles.
game. Yeah, I think they're going to play really well. You know, who the quarterback is up for debate, but I mean, if they start at 2-6, I have to believe Pickett's going to be the quarterback. But I like them against the Saints. I don't. You know, since Drew Brees left, that's a whole different team, and I don't think they're that good. So I think they should win that game pretty handily, actually.
Okay, so then after that tough game at the Eagles, the Steelers, oh no, not the Eagles, the Saints, excuse me, they'll be hosting the Bengals on November 20th. So obviously compared to week 1, a little bit different scenario now. They're not going to be on the road, they're going to be at home. So what do you think about the Bengals now in that matchup?
Yeah, again, I think it'll be a close game because it's a divisional game, it's a home game, but I just think, you know, unfortunately the Bengals are a better team right now, and they'll be competitive. But no, I don't see them winning that game. It'll be close, you know, less than 7 points, but I just don't think they have enough to beat the Bengals right now.
Yeah, I mean, in years past, right, they usually split. There's been times they beat them twice in one season. Steelers could be on the other end of that just because of how good the Bengals are and how talented they are. And Joe Burrow obviously is an exceptional quarterback. But a week later, they'll be at Indianapolis. That might be a Monday Night Football game, I think.
Yes, it is.
It is, right? Okay, yeah. So they'll be at Indy. That's a Matt Ryan Colts team. Wow, that's weird to say. And Jonathan Taylor and all those guys. So that matchup, I think, is a little bit up in the air. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I like the Steelers in that game. I think, you know, Matt Ryan's past his prime. The Colts are like, they're that bad luck team. You know, it just you know, based on what happened to them last year, losing that game against Jacksonville at the end of the season when everybody had them and, you know, opened the door for us with that crazy end to the season. But that team's just missing something, and I think Ryan is past his prime. I think the defense will play well, and I think the offense will actually do some damage on that defense. So I like the Steelers in that game.
The Steelers should bring back Ben Roethlisberger for that game. He loves his Colts matchups.
This is true. Him and Andrew Luck, yes.
Yeah, he loves playing against the Colts. And then a week later, it looks like back to Sunday, they'll be at Atlanta. So that's a 1:00 game. That game's interesting as well. I want to hear your thoughts on that. I don't think they've been great on the road at Atlanta, right?
No, but is the quarterback, is Mariota their quarterback for Atlanta?
Quarterback,
yeah, I like the Steelers in that game also. I just, unfortunately, I don't think Atlanta has a lot on offense other than Kyle Pitts, and Mariota is really a backup quarterback that's going to be starting again, even though he was such a high draft pick years ago. But like, I like the Steelers in that period of the schedule to go on a little run there, even though they're road games. I think they're going to win both of them.
Yeah, that'd be huge because, right, you had them 2-6 before the bye.
Yes, 2-6.
Yeah. they got to string some wins along
Yeah, you got to win
eventually.
somewhere along the way. That's
Yeah.
right.
And then after that is the first Ravens matchup, December 11th. That's pretty late in the season to play them for the first time, and that's the home Ravens
Right.
game.
I actually liked them in that game as well. I think other than Miami, no one plays Lamar Jackson like the Steelers do. And they're at home. They're always tough against the Ravens. Winning in Baltimore is a whole different ball game. But so I like them to go on a little mini streak there. Again, I initially we had them at 4 or 5 wins, but I'm going to up that total a little bit. But I think again it'll be a knockdown, drag out fight as usual against the Ravens. But I could see Boswell hitting a field goal after Justin Tucker hits one from like 60 yards or something. I'm sure. I mean, that guy can kick anywhere, but I can see them winning by a field goal at the end of that game.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be a classic Steeler Raven matchup. And then they'll be at Carolina with a Baker Mayfield matchup on tap. That's going to be a fun game, especially because Baker Mayfield has had his way with us in the past, especially in that playoff game.
I like him in that game as well. Again, I looked at the schedule when I had him at 2-6. I was saying this is not a 3 or 4 win team. Obviously, I mean they're not the same team, but I could see them winning these games, and I like them against Carolina. Also, that other than Tampa in that division, I think they're going to beat all 3 of those teams. I just don't think that those teams are that good right now, and we still got some young. We have weapons, and the defense is key, but I don't think these teams are good enough to beat us, even if we're in their home stadium. I think the Steelers can win those games, close games, but I think they can win them. So I have them winning that game as well.
I also think the Steelers fans take over Carolina and Atlanta. I mean, I know they did it in 2014 in Atlanta when they went there, but I also think they take over Carolina. I think that's going to be a big boost for the young team.
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, like the NFC South is probably one of the most weakest divisions in football right now.
Right.
Maybe besides like the NFC East, like there's a couple. The NFC is like pretty rough there. And then if they don't win this game, it's going to be kind of sad. I mean, this is now the Franco game, so this is Christmas Eve against the Raiders. I mean, you got to hope they can pull one out for this one.
Yeah, I don't have them winning that game. I hope they do. I mean, obviously, the emotions are going to be crazy. They're going to have the ceremony, for Franco, and I think I heard Villapiano is going to be there again, and I'm sure. I mean, is Bradshaw going to be there? Did they say he was going to be at the game? I would hope he would be. And Frenchie Fuqua should be there also because he was part of that play as well. So hopefully they'll all be there. But Raiders are tough. They're another team that you got to watch out for. And Carr stays healthy. They got Devontae Adams. They're going to be tough. I could see them fighting with the Chargers in that division in Kansas City. I mean, they're a team you really don't. And we don't play the Raiders well, even when they are 2 and 3 win team. For some reason, we just don't beat them anymore. So. I'm not going to give us that close game, but I don't think we're going to win that game.
Yeah, I think the AFC West is probably the best division in football right now, outside of the AFC North. Which is you're right. You said the Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders. I mean, the Broncos have Russell Wilson now. He's not who he used to be, but that's still a good team. Yeah. It's not like the NFC South where you're talking about like the Falcons and the Saints. Like these are 4 very respectable teams.
I mean, if Russell Wilson has a great year for them, couldn't the whole division make the playoffs? I mean, you could have a division winner and 3 wild cards. They can all come from that division. I mean, that's how good that division is.
Yeah, and I mean, right? The Steelers only play the Raiders. It looks like during the regular season, right? They don't play the Broncos, Chiefs, or Chargers. Thank God.
No.
Yeah, and then a week later, the second last week of the season, on my birthday, January 1st, they're at Baltimore. That's gonna be a terrible birthday gift.
Yeah, that game could get ugly. Yeah, I'm not. I think Baltimore is going to be fighting for the division or a wild card, and we're going to be like middle of the road. So it'll be tough. But no, I don't see us winning that game. And we historically don't play well in Baltimore. So
no. And then to cap off the season on January 8th, home against Cleveland. I think Deshaun Watson will probably be back by then, right? I think his suspension is 11 games, or maybe a little less than that. But yeah, so Deshaun Watson versus Steelers in that game.
I like the Steelers in that game, even with Deshaun Watson. I think they're gonna, I think the Raven game will be tough, but I think they'll pull out the Brown game to end the season. Deshaun Watson is obviously a good quarterback, but I think Cleveland will be out of it by then. And I don't know how well he's going to play. And then Cleveland winning in Pittsburgh. Other than that disaster of a playoff game a couple of years ago, they don't play well in Pittsburgh. So I like the Steelers in that game.
Okay, so you have them. I'm trying to recount them. That's around like 7 or 8 wins.
I think I had them 8 and 9. Yeah. Yeah,
That's not bad.
and if they can win the Jet game, 9-8, but I again that game scares me. But the only thing is they do have a lot of road games, and I gave them some road wins, but again, they have great coaching and they're always competitive and they have winners on that team. So I just don't see them winning 4 or 5 games like initially when I looked at the schedule. And then, playing the NFC South helps because it's not one of the stronger conference divisions in the NFC. So I think that unfortunately the only other game in the NFC is Philly. So that kind of, is a bad role there. But what are you going to do? But I kind of see them at 8-9, 7-10, 8-9. I'd love to see them beat the Bengals one of those games, but I just don't see it. I think the Bengals are tough. I think the Bengals are going to win the division. Everybody's picking the Ravens. I think the Bengals are going to win the division.
Yeah.
One thing with the Steelers is they'll always win a game that they shouldn't win, and they'll always lose a game they should win.
This is true. They're notorious for losing games they should win. We can go back in history. It's unfortunate they underachieve sometimes, and every once in a while they'll pull one out. Like you said, maybe this is the year because the expectations aren't high. So maybe this is the year they upset somebody like a Buffalo or a Miami or somebody on the road like that. That'd be nice. So
do you think in any world this year with that record, that's a playoff record, or do you think they're going to miss it?
I've got news for you. I think the only thing is a lot of these teams are going to beat each other up this year, but 10 wins may not get you in. Didn't that happen in Miami a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
There's so many good teams in the AFC. The whole West we talked about. You got New England and Miami and Buffalo up in the East, and then, 2 of the teams in our division. So that's a lot of teams to fight with. It really, and then, I only think one team will come out of the Colt division, whether it be Tennessee or Indianapolis. So, but there's just too many good teams in the AFC. It's loaded this year.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. I think I'm never going to count the Steelers out just knowing the Steelers, but uphill battle. They need things to go right. If that offensive line plays at least average, I think they get in. But it's going to be tough.
It'd be tough just to get out of their division because Baltimore and Cincinnati are just top-notch teams, and Cleveland's not a gimme, but you hope they win at least one of the games with a 4 against those 2 teams, which I'm giving them the win with the Ravens, but they're just tough. It's just tough for them right now, especially being in transition with a new quarterback, and we don't know about the defense yet and the offensive line. So you'll know, like Joe, you had mentioned maybe Pickett coming in week 4 against the Jets. You'll kind of know what the offensive line those first few games.
Yeah.
And that Belichick's going to take advantage of them in week 2. So week 2 will kind of give you a barometer of where they are and if they have a ways to go on the offensive line.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great indication because, even though Brady's not a Patriot anymore, just watching the Patriots beat them up for at least my entire life, like just to have them win that game, I think they'll have a little bit more confidence in Trubisky because it's still Belichick. He's still coaching, the team, the defense, and everything. But before we move to the last question, which will be about your favorite Steeler memories, quick side question. Now that you've kind of surveyed the entire AFC, at least, do you have an early Super Bowl prediction, like of an AFC winner and an NFC winner? This is obviously way too early to say this, but at this point in time, if you were to place a futures bet, who would you put the bet on?
I think it's Buffalo, because they remind me of the Steelers in the mid '90s, where and we'll get to that game in a minute, where the Steelers in '94 should have went to the Super Bowl and they lost a terrible game to the Chargers, and then they made it the next year. I kind of see Buffalo with that progression now. They should have won the Chief game, they didn't. Josh Allen played fantastic, so I think it's their time right now. I really do. Although the Chargers are tough, so I think that could be your AFC title game, actually, the Chargers and the Bills, because I think Kansas City losing Tyreek Hill is gonna knock them down a notch. So I think those are your 2 bad. But if I had to pick, I would pick Buffalo.
My dad was at that '94 title game.
I was there, Joe.
You were there too?
I told Jonathan, we were in the end zone, my buddy Larry and I, and we were in the end zone that the last play came at us. So when the Steelers were up, if you remember, in that game, I think they were up, was it 10-7 or 10 whatever? I remember at halftime it was 10-0. The Steelers were winning, and I looked at the statistics and I said to my buddy Larry, 220 yards to 40, that's not good. We should be way up on this team. I think they hit John L. Williams for a touchdown, if I remember. And then the Chargers had these 2 fluke plays, if you remember. They hit the Papunu, the tight end, for a touchdown. And then we were in the end zone, and as second the play developed, that last play, I turned around And my buddy Larry goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Wait till you see what happens." He just turned the defender right around, and Tony Martin caught that pass right in front of us, which was terrible. And then unfortunately, we were in the end zone when the Steelers were going the other way down the field, and you thought O'Donnell was going to bring him back, and unfortunately, I think it was a Junior Seau may have knocked the ball away, but I don't think that was the play. But anyway, and Art Rooney said that was the worst loss in their history, and I tend to agree. It was very, very. I don't get too emotional anymore, but I was pretty upset after that game because they were by far the better team.
My dad says, I think he was actually in the end zone too. I have to ask him. I'll ask him when he comes home from work. But he said that loss put him in a depression until like March.
I know the feeling. I totally agree with him. It was definitely in my life. I mean, I'm 50 years watching them, and by far the worst loss. And I'm not so sure they would have beaten the 49ers that year because they were a machine, with Steve Young that year. But they should have went to the Super Bowl. But yeah, that was a very bad loss. So hopefully we won't experience that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that loss was just brutal. And I mean, Dad, you've had a lot of great memories though as a Steelers fan with the amount of games you've been to. So just throw out a couple out there, just from games you've watched, games you've been to live, which I think will probably be the best ways to retell, just because you have so many great memories.
Okay.
You've been going to games for so long, so give us some of those games.
All right, I'll throw you. Well, let's go way back because my dad took me to see the Steelers in 1975 against the Jets, so I got to see that great team. And it was cold, I remember. And Joe Namath was the quarterback, and I remember the game. The Steelers won, I want to say 20-7, but I had a great time, and I got to see all those Hall of Famers. So that was my first taste of the Steelers at it was 75, so I was 13. And then, and I think I told you this story. Mom and I went to a game at the old Memorial Stadium against the Ravens right before Ravens Stadium opened, and Cordell Stewart was the quarterback, and the Steelers were horrible in the first half. We were sitting in bleachers. The stadium was really old, and the Steelers were losing 24-7 at the half, and Cordell Stewart was just horrible. And I told my wife, I said, if the Ravens score again, we're just going to leave and go into the Inner Harbor and get something to eat. And I remember the Steelers returned the second half kickoff for a touchdown. The whole game turned around, and the Steelers ended up winning. I think it was 42-34, and Cordell Stewart broke one for like 75 yards at the end of the game. But that was one of the most exciting games I've ever been to, that specific game. And then I was fortunate enough to go to the first game at Ravens Stadium the following year where the Steelers won again. So those are great memories for me being there. And then, of course, when you and I went in 2009, going with my dad in 1975 and then get to go with you, that was pretty cool. So we had a good time. And then as far as watching games go, and I've told you this countless times that if I wasn't married, I would have went to the 2008 Super Bowl because Springsteen was at halftime and the Steelers were in the game. And obviously the greatest ending ever with Ben, the greatest throw I've ever seen. So I would have went there. But in history, I mean, the Immaculate Reception, the Steelers had a great playoff win with touchdown Tommy Maddox against Cleveland. And I think it was the 90s where they came back from a huge deficit. So that game comes to mind. And then, obviously the Immaculate Extension with Antonio Brown. Whenever they beat the Ravens, it's always a great win, for the Steelers. But those are the ones that come to mind right away. And then, watching the 70s Steelers, I can't really choose too many because there was so many great games. I mean, always against you got to remember, in the early 70s, the Raiders, the Dolphins, and the Steelers were probably three of the best teams all time. Well, you don't really have that now. So those teams were always beating one another up. And then even the late 70s, when the passing game opened up, you had the Cowboys and you had Denver at the end there. But yeah, fortunately for that period of time from like 72 to 81, it was just great to be a Steeler fan. I mean, they were all the Hall of Famers and all the great games that they had. And they were by far, to me, the toughest team ever. That defense was the greatest defense ever.
Yeah. And that, I mean, the first thing you said was the first game you took me to against the Browns. I mean, for background, I don't know if I told you this, Joe. This was when we were sitting on front row of the 50-yard line. I mean, that was a great Steelers team. I think like Mike Wallace was still on that Steelers team, and like they had a ton of weapons.
That was the year after they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So I mean, like we were talking about how Josh Cribbs was on the Browns. I mean, he had a punt return for a touchdown in the game we went to. We got to meet Joe Thomas before the game, which was really cool. Because remember that whole experience of us being on the Browns side on the 50-yard line when Joe Thomas threw up the football to us, like all the Steelers were staring him down on the other side, like because we all had our Steelers stuff on. Right. Like, oh, what is this Browns player doing throwing the football to one of our fans?
Right.
I thought that was really funny.
Very nice.
And like my favorite game we've ever watched was probably outside of the Super Bowls, the AFC title game against the Ravens, the year of the Super Bowl win. There was one. Remember where I fell asleep?
Oh, that's where Palomalo picked off
Yeah,
Flacco, and oh yeah, I think I
that
woke
was
you up in that game.
the
That was very
loudest
exciting.
our house ever was. When you're carrying me on your shoulders
Yeah,
when Palomalo ran it back. Oh my God, we were crying just how
yeah,
exciting
that
it
was
was.
fantastic. Yeah, that was very, very exciting.
Like looking back on, I'm just like I watch the highlights all the time. You look at like Joe Flacco, like I can't imagine how difficult it must for him to leave Pittsburgh after that game because that was like the happiest like I've ever seen Heinz Field look like in my lifetime.
I mean,
Probably.
that Raven team was loaded. I mean, that you had
Yeah,
Ed Reed, Suggs, and Ray Lewis. I mean, that was a phenomenal team, and he was a rookie, I think, that year, Flacco, and I think the
yeah,
coach was a rookie too. I think Harbaugh was a rookie, so that would
hmm
have been some win for them if they won that in Pittsburgh. So, and I think we beat them 3 times that year.
Yep.
yeah. And that's crazy that like you went to the Ravens' first home game in the new stadium. The Steelers have had their way with the Ravens at all these important Ravens milestones. And
Yeah,
then when the Steelers have had these milestones, like even like that AFC Championship game, the Ravens still couldn't beat the Steelers. So a little bit of bragging rights there,
yes,
so to say.
yes, but they've provided a lot of thrills. Like I said, we had the downtime, like Joe had mentioned in the '80s, but even in the '90s, they had some great wins. They beat good Buffalo teams, and even the Super Bowl, they almost, and Dallas was by far the better team that year, and they had the ball down. I think it was down 3 at midfield, and Dallas was a heavy favorite, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. But they got there. And O'Donnell had a great year that year for them, so they provided a lot of great thrills there. And then they beat. I went to a game in '97 where they beat Elway with my two brothers. It was about 5 degrees there, and that was another great game where the stands were literally shaking. I mean, the place was going crazy, and unfortunately, they lost to Denver in the title game that year.
And I mean, it stinks now because I mean we're going to the Bucks game this year, and obviously like we're bringing my brother who's never been to a Steelers game. The fact that they've renamed Heinz Field to what is it, a Creaser or a Creature?
Actor Shore Stadium.
Like
Yeah.
that's just devastating.
Yeah, I
I
don't
feel
like that
bad.
name. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I didn't like when they changed it from Three Rivers. I could live with Heinz, but yeah, Cretia, I'm not a fan of that name, unfortunately.
Like the ketchup bottle, that's just like iconic. Even like I talked to my friends who are Giants fans, who are like that's one of the most iconic stadiums in sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I just feel like that's a little bit bittersweet now. That
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe they actually changed it. I never thought that. I mean, maybe someday, but I didn't think it'd be this soon.
Yeah, there was a different vibe to Three Rivers Stadium though than Heinz Field because all the history and with Larry and we used to talk to a lot of the older fans and they used to tell us what it was like, and obviously the defense was the big deal back in the '70s, but those were the games where you played all these great teams, but just the history there, and all the titles that they won and the fact that they hadn't won. I think the last playoff game they were in, I think, was like 1947 before Franco got there, and then to go on that run. Every game, it was like they were going crazy for the defense, and the offense always took back seat. But think about all the great offensive players that they had, that were overshadowed by the defense. But those are fun times. But we had a good run, and hopefully, this will be something new for us. We got Pickett. I guess the fact that they passed on Marino, they grabbed Pickett. I'm wondering if that had to do with it. I mean, a lot of teams passed Pickett, but Art Rooney Sr. loved Dan Marino, so I never understood why they didn't take him. But what are you going to do? I mean, you can't. Very few teams can do 3 in a row where you have 3 Hall of Famers. I think Green Bay is really the only team, and even Dallas maybe with Meredith. Meredith's really not Hall of Fame, but they had Staubach and Aikman. But Green Bay with Starr and Favre and Rodgers. That very rarely happens.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Steelers have also been lucky in that from going from Bradshaw and I know Ben was years later between like they had the quarterbacks in between. But there's some other franchise. I mean, look at the Cleveland Browns. Like they've had like 60 different quarterbacks, or some ridiculous stat, especially like the last like 20 years. How many different starters they've had? I feel like the Steelers have been a little bit spoiled.
They have. We as fans as well, because we've had some great years, some bad years, but it's been a great run, and I'm sure it'll continue. But like I said, this will be an interesting year. It's tough without Ben when you have a quarterback for that long. And, you root for Pickett. You hope he does well. And, we have some great players. I mean, TJ and Minka, and hopefully Deontay Johnson will break out, and Pickens and Claypool. I mean, things could work out. Who knows? You never know. Anything can happen, especially when it comes to the Steelers. Like Joe said, they could surprise us again and maybe knock off the Bengals on opening night, like they did against the Buffalo.
Yeah. It's going to be so weird for John and I because, I mean, you and my dad know all the different quarterbacks that came through 10. I mean, me and John only know. We only know Ben.
Yeah.
So it's going to be weird. seeing
Yeah.
Mitch Trubisky trot out there opening week.
Yeah. I'm sure the
Like-
fans will feel the same way. But yeah, I mean, anything can happen, like I said, and the tough shoes to fill with Ben. But Ben gave us a great run. I mean, he was phenomenal. I mean, I saw Bradshaw as well, but different type of quarterback because Bradshaw, as great as he was, the team was loaded. I mean, with Ben, a lot of the time he'd have to basically put him on his shoulders and take him. And other than John Elway and Roger Staubach, he's probably one of the best comeback quarterbacks I've ever seen. So we'll miss him, but looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
And I mean, like, do you think, let's say this season is they perform just not as well as we think they will? I mean, I know the expectations are low anyway without Ben, but do you think they should just keep Tomlin into the future? Do you think now that Ben's gone, I know Tomlin's been there for so long. I know he's never had the losing record argument. If the Steelers struggle, do you think they should almost have a whole change of personnel in a couple of years, or do you think they just ride it out with Tomlin going forward?
I would give him a little more time. I mean, again, he's got new coaches because he's constantly rotating coaches. So I would give him a little more time. I think he still relates to the players. He's obviously a player coach, but I think he kind of has that personality. And he's a risk taker. I mean, he's not conservative. Bill Carroll was kind of conservative, where Mike Tomlin's not. Sometimes to his detriment. So I would give him a little bit more time. Again, he's got to start from scratch with a new quarterback, which is never easy. So, but assuming the Steelers don't fall flat, which I don't think they will, I think that's they would have to be like a 5-win team for a couple of years, because even Cower had a couple of years where he only won 5 or 6 games, and they hung on to him, and the team turned around. So I would think they give Tomlin the same courtesy, because I know Art Rooney Jr. is a big fan of his. So I would think it'd be a few years, but if they had really bad years, then you may have to rethink the whole thing and maybe bring in a whole new team.
For sure. But that'll wrap up this episode of Talking Football with Joe and John. Dad, thank you so much for joining this episode. You did great. It was awesome to hear all your insight from all your years of being a Steelers fan. Definitely going to be weird not seeing Ben next Sunday, but it's going to be a great season. Excited to watch it with you. But stay tuned for the rest of our content, which will be coming up soon. I know Joe's going on his little Europe sabbatical, so we'll be back after that trip. So hopefully by then,
We got to do a preview for the Bengals game too. And
that is
maybe
true. So
if we have time on that Sunday, maybe we could. Are you going to be around for the game, or are you going to the Jets game? For
Sunday, I should be able to record for the Bengals.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I'm good. But then after that, I know we're not going to come back right until the Jet game, or
I'll talk to you after this, because there might be a change of plans with that. We might be able to do some stuff. So
okay, cool. Yeah. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and have a great day.
All right. Thanks, guys.